learning in this year what my stumbling blocks are, what red flags I need to pay attention to, what things I'm going to have to stay away from. And they may be perfectly fine things for other authors to do and participate in. They're not bad. But for me to protect my heart posture going into this, the stakes are higher than a regular job.
Welcome back to our conversation about creating from rest. My name is Rachel Farrenbach, and I am joined by my friend Erin Gurneau. And we are talking about what it means to create from rest from two sides of the coin, from a side of just complete stopping, which is what Erin has done this year, a Sabbath year for her. And then from the other side of continuing to build and work on things, but having a posture of rest as you're building, which is where I find myself. Which is interesting because I think we talked about this in the last episode. Um, my understanding of what this year was going to look like has just completely morphed as the months have gone on, and just come up against different things in my life. So what I was calling a scaling year, the Lord was reminding me that it really wasn't a scaling year, it was a planting year. But even that, having to have a posture of rest in a year where you're putting down roots and you're planting and it feels like it's not going as fast as you want it to, has been a lesson for me in what it means to create from rest. And then for Erin, you have felt like this year has just been, you thought it was going to look one way too, and it has looked completely different as you have learned what it means to set things down and not pick up anything, um, and wait on the Lord in that way. And God has been moving and making things happen with you and on your behalf, which has been really fun to hear about and really fun to watch unfold because you're like, I just set it down. I just all set it down and walked and like took a step back and God has picked it up and taken it. So it's been fun having this conversation month after month. We are at the time of recording this, we're at the end of August. And so we're checking in with one another. I feel like we just had the conversation in July.
Yeah,
Like, I
these
don't
months are
feel
going by so fast.
they go by so fast. And I'm like, what happened? Like, what do I actually have to like update her about? Um, Now you and I are in different groups outside of this conversation. So I know what has been kind of going on for you. So I'm like, oh, she's gonna have some things to talk about. But like I'm thinking here going, I don't know what I have to talk about because I feel like this month has just flown by, like school started back up and fall activities. And I had a surgery, a very minor surgery, to help me breathe better. So, but like I've been doing a lot of recovery. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel like I have made no progress forward in the things that I was hoping to accomplish. Um, but even in that, there feels like there's been a lesson to like, even when I'm stopped, God's still working on my behalf, which I feel like I'm learning from you, like being reminded of because of these conversations.
Yeah.
But also just kind of like, okay, Lord, I don't know where the last month went, and I sure hope you have been doing things because I've been like sitting on my butt, is what it feels like. So, how about you, Erin? How have you felt this last month? I know you just said it feels like it flew by, but what's it look like for you from where you're sitting?
Well, I'll pick up from right after we stopped recording last month. I we had this bad habit of talking for another half hour to an hour afterwards. We should probably just keep recording. But one of the questions I was kind of talking to you about was the closer I get to the end of the year, the more I want to plan for the coming year because I'm a planner. And so I like to have, kind of my schedule laid out. I want to know what's coming up, what projects are on the calendar, and how I want things to line up. And one of the unexpected things on the calendar for next year is this retreat that's going to be in March. And I had big plans for the spring. And now all of those plans, it's like, okay, I need to clear the whole really up through this retreat just for the retreat. Um, that kind of throws a wrench in a lot of things that I was hoping to do. It's like I wanted to hit the ground running January 1st. And so I was asking you, where do I draw the line as far as planning goes? Is planning work? This is kind of a gray area. I'm not doing anything on these projects, but what should I do? And you gave me great, wonderful, wise advice. And you told me, Erin, if I were you, I would not do any planning until January 1st.
Mhm.
That was
And, like, remind me,
such
what did I say? I
good
had
advice.
forgotten about that, but yeah, that's right, that's what I did say.
That was such good advice. And I will be very honest with you because we could be honest with each other. As you were giving me that wise advice, I already knew I was not going to be following it. I was just like, there is no way. There's no way I can wait until January 1st and not have any kind of plan of like just a timeline of when these things are going to
Mhm.
happen or an idea of like, here are the big projects I want to conquer or whatever. But I should have taken your advice because that little gray area got me into trouble this month.
Mhm.
So one of the big projects that I want to do next year is releasing book 4 in the Gold Feather Gardener series. But I wanted to put books 1 through 4 into an omnibus and do a Kickstarter. I've never
Mm.
done a Kickstarter before. This would be like a huge learning curve, lots of new things. So I was kind of just thinking about the Kickstarter. I may have joined a Kickstarter for Authors Facebook group just to hear the chatter, see, you don't know what you don't know. So just to see what do I not know? What do I need to maybe learn in the new year? Whatever. This is all fine, right? We're in a gray area. Then I may have watched some YouTube videos on how to set up a Kickstarter for authors. And those videos didn't make so much sense because I had never actually been inside of the Kickstarter, website and seen like when you log in, here's how your page looks to create everything. So I then logged in just so I could see the dashboard and, what elements there are. So I could know what kinds of things I'm going to need when it's time. And then there was uploading of images and creating of, text and setting up tiers. And, I didn't realize how
Oh my
far I had
gosh.
stepped out of the gray area into
Yes.
the like, we're in full work zone now,
Mhm.
until it was a heart posture that
Mhm.
raised the red flag. And it was when I was creating the timeline. You're supposed to set up your pre launch page. Hear this, supposed to, right?
Mhm.
Supposed to set up your pre launch page 3 months before you do your launch. You should have X number of people on that before you launch. Then you need a month to set up your campaign. You have to get it
Mhm.
approved, blah, blah. The whole timeline in my mind starts laying out on the calendar
Yeah.
just mentally. I want to be done with fulfillment by summer so it doesn't take away from time with my kids. In the middle of all
Mhm.
this is this retreat. What am I supposed to do with this, God? And I start getting stressed and I start feeling behind. And the question comes up in my mind, how am I going to make this work?
Mhm.
And that was like red flag, huge red
Mhm.
flag. Why do I have to make anything work?
Yeah.
I have just watched God over an entire year do more things than I could have ever dreamed or imagined, just like the verse. I've watched him be faithful over and over again. I've watched him, it feels like part the Red Sea so that I could walk through in just incredibly faithful ways. And here I am at literally the first opportunity, forsaking all of that and trying to figure out how can I make this work?
Mm.
It's
Feeling
either
like it is all on your shoulders, right?
exactly, exactly. Like I am totally weighed down by this burden of a project that number one, I have given myself, right?
Mhm.
There's no boss over me making me do this. Number two, I'm stressed because of what industry standards say I should
Mhm.
be accomplishing over a certain amount of time,
Mhm.
which God is outside of time. So we can just throw that out the window, right? Right. And three, like, he's either faithful or he's not, and I either trust him or I don't.
Mhm.
And when I'm taking this on in this way, I'm showing that I'm not trusting him
Mhm.
and that his faithfulness is not enough for me, which is ridiculous.
Mm.
So, huge come to Jesus moment. We had a lot of words and just I want to take a quick minute to say how different this confession was versus what it was in February when it just
Mm,
felt so gross unloading all this internal stuff because I felt condemned at the beginning of the year when all of this was coming out. It was like I hit the wall and thought, there is no hope for me. God, I don't know if you can fix what's wrong here
mm,
inside of me. And when we hit that point of no hope and facing condemnation, that is not from him. That's from the enemy. And that's not truth. That's not in his word. But when we have confession and we feel grace with no condemnation, it's like a completely different thing. I don't even know how to
yeah.
describe it, but he's taking off this heavy burden and reminding you, my burden is a light. My yoke is easy. If you're feeling that heaviness, it's because you're not doing what I'm telling you to do.
Mm,
And I was taking on something that he has not called me to carry, not in this Sabbath year, but also not next year. You
mm,
know, obviously, I'm not supposed to be doing this project right now because I'm not supposed to be doing any projects right now. So that's an easy, like, it's easy to know right now. Should I do this? Should I not? Well, the answer
mhm.
is no. Obviously,
Right.
I have to remind myself of that. But the answer is no. I'm not supposed to be doing that right now. Next year, the answer is going to be a little bit more difficult because it might be yes or it
Mm,
might be no. But either way, whether it's yes or no, that isn't the way that I should be doing it. That isn't the
mhm,
heart posture that I should have when I finally pick this project up.
mhm,
Um, so that was kind of the big chunk of my month. And it was hard because the girls went back to school. And even in a regular year, I kind of take the summer off to be with them. And then when they go back to school, there's this internal transition that happens where you're like, okay, now it's time to dive back in. Now I have some time to myself. Now I
mhm.
get back into the rhythm and the routine. So I think that just that internal drive was kicking in at a natural season shift. Um, but goodness, it did not take long for me to just fall right off the bandwagon of what I've been able to do all year long. But I'm so
Mhm,
grateful to have that lesson now, when it is so cut and dry and so black and white. So, anyway, I will not be touching the Kickstarter in any way, shape, or form until January 1st. And you know what? It's going to happen in his timing, or it's not going to
mhm,
happen at all. And either way, it's fine, right?
mhm.
He's in control.
You mentioned that you know that that's something you wanna do next year. How are you approaching deciding what you're gonna do next year? Have you kinda thought through that yet? Like, 'cause you made the statement
Yeah.
that's something you wanna do. Um, when you approach the Sabbath year, you're like, "These are the things I'm laying down." So how are you going about deciding what you pick back up and what you don't pick back up and what new things you put on your plate?
Yeah. That's a great question, first of all. One, I'm still figuring out, and,
Okay.
um, I think I'll forever be figuring.
Mm,
But one of the things, um, one of the kind of filters that I've used for this year is nothing for personal gain.
mm,
And so it's just
yeah.
kind of a quick phrase, but it's been easy for me to hold things up and why?
Mhm,
Not what should I do, but why do I want to do
mhm,
this? What is the purpose behind it? Um, and if I did this and nobody knew, would I still do it?
mm,
So is it for an outside audience or is it kingdom work that I'm doing for God? If only God knew, you
mhm.
know, would I still do this work?
And that was
And
your defining, like, line. Then if it
yeah,
was something you would do just for the Lord, then you could do it? Is that what you're saying?
somewhat. I mean, it's been a little bit stricter than that, but that was kind of the first line of defense for
Mm,
this
okay.
year. Um, and so I would like to keep that line of defense in the future.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
And I don't know. We'll see how that goes because as I'm saying
Yeah,
that, I'm questioning like, what does that look like in an industry where you need to build a platform, you need to have numbers, blah, 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 all these things.
yeah. I was gonna
Um,
say, like, I'm wrestling with this question too in a different way. Um, Because if you were to approach it just from like I actually talked to my husband about this last night. I said, if I was just an entrepreneur that was approaching something and saying, or even if I just was looking for a job, right?
Mhm.
Like I just needed to provide, or I'm looking for something that would bring in income for our family. It would not feel as emotionally charged as this thing that we do as authors does,
Yeah.
right? Where we're bringing into this whole like, what does the Lord ask of us? What are we supposed to do? What is the messaging? How can I serve the Lord with this? How does this kingdom work? I feel like we don't approach work that provides for us in the same way. And I
Yeah.
don't know if that is a right or wrong posture. If we should be approaching all kinds of work with that thing, but I was saying to him, like, if we were just trying to evaluate, because we're hoping that what I do on a couple different levels, that it becomes something that our family can do together. Like that my husband could be involved and he wouldn't have to be in the corporate world anymore because he really does not enjoy that environment. Um, but I'm like, if we were thinking from a perspective of what would be the best family business for us, what would be the one that would be profitable for us? What would be something that would be a good providing business for us? It would be a much more calculated decision, a much more like profit and loss analysis. What are our talents and strengths and how could we utilize those? Like it would be a less emotionally charged decision. But when we come to this conversation about what we can accomplish as authors and how we co-create with God, it feels much more intricately tied to who we are as people and less about just work. Because at the end of the day, all the work that we do should be done in a way that would be honoring to the Lord, right? Like if we're power washing sidewalks, we should do it to the best of our ability and with a smile on our face and with customer service that treats the other people with dignity, that doesn't cheat people out of their money and all the things, right? Like we can apply those kingdom principles, like God's kingdom principles to any work that we do. But as an author and in this like creative space that we're in, and what you just said, like, if I was willing to create this without anybody seeing it, right? That's the posture you wanna take, and am I kind of not saying that's right or wrong? I'm not putting a definitive on it. I'm just pushing back a little bit and saying, "Why do we approach this work that we do? Why do we approach it with such an emotionally charged, spiritually charged conversation around it, and we don't have that more analytic side to it?" Like, I just saying, like, in this space, we can get very much about doing the Lord's work, divorcing it from the business side of it, even though there is a business side to it, and saying that the business side that there's something maybe striving about it, but I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I just rambled a bit for now, but that, like, I'm struggling with this question of, like, where is that defining line? Because if I was in any other kind of industry and I was right, like, if I owned a Chick-fil-A, right? I would have to worry about profit and loss. I would have to worry about my employees. I would still be honoring the Lord. I mean, it's the Lord's chicken, right? So you still, you still like, I mean, they choose not to be open on Sundays, right? Like they're honoring the Lord with their business. You walk into a Chick-fil-A, you know there's going to be praise and worship music playing over the speakers, right? There's just, they choose certain ways to honor the Lord. They treat their employees a certain way. Their employees treat their customers a certain way. And in all of that, they're honoring the Lord. Why is it for them different than it is for us?
Mm.
And how can we both steward like that creative space with the Lord and still be honoring the business side of it that he's called us to as well? So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if you have any thoughts, if you have any
Those are good
insights.
questions. I don't think there is one line for everybody. Like I don't think there's one standard. I was just reading this morning in First Corinthians and Paul's talking about how um, as apostles, they should get compensated for their work, right? Like
Yeah.
even if the ox doesn't get muzzled while he's treading out the grain because the person who's working deserves they have this right to um some kind of compensation for their work.
Mhm.
And he was saying, Peter travels around with his wife. He, gets paid by the churches when he does his work. And Paul says, "But I have refused to to claim this right." So even though he has the right for compensation, he personally has chosen not to take it. And he prides himself on, being a tent maker and kind of
But he's making money, though,
right. He's making
in
money,
his
but not
tent
from
making
his ministry. So
but
he
not from
wants
the
to do
street.
it a separate way, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think there isn't one right or wrong way. Peter isn't doing it right or wrong. Paul isn't
Mm.
doing it right or wrong. They're doing it different, but I feel like each person has a different conviction
Mhm.
and maybe different struggles. And for me, with this achiever mindset, um, I feel like there are a lot of things that I'm going to have to say no to that a normal person, I don't say normal person, but a different person wouldn't have to say no to. Kind of like same book. He's talking about, what food is okay or
Mhm.
not okay to eat.
Yeah.
Like if this food is a stumbling block to someone, then don't eat it in their presence or whatever the case. Like
Right.
I'm learning in this year what my stumbling blocks are, what what red flags I need to pay attention to, what things I'm going to have to stay away from. And they may be perfectly fine things for other authors to do and participate in. They're not bad things. But for me to
Yeah.
protect my heart posture going into this, because the stakes are higher. The stakes are higher than a regular job. The
Mhm.
scriptures say if you lead someone astray with your words, then it's better to have a millstone around your neck and be thrown into the ocean. And I don't want that.
I guess
Flee.
I understand what you're saying because you're talking about
Yeah.
spiritual truths and you're doing
Right.
devotionals, and so there is a level of ministry that's happening.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of it from, like, a perspective of somebody who's writing a fiction novel,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, I understand, like, I definitely last year when I was writing my Dwell Advent study, I took that very seriously and
Yeah.
was very concerned that I'm like, "I do not wanna screw this up," right? Like, I don't wanna put anything heretical in this book, and
Yeah.
so I took it very seriously. Of course, like, I'm not gonna put anything heretical in my novel, but it's a little bit less, like, the line is a lot more gray to
Yeah.
you that, and so it doesn't feel quite as, like, intense. So it's not as, like, clear cut, right? It's not like I'm ministering, but I am, but I'm not. So then it's like it extends to, my social media platforms and stuff like that. Like, so I guess where I'm going with this is that in our industry, we often talk about it being a ministry. Like, you
Mhm.
have a message to share. You are encouraging somebody, you're ministering to them, regardless of if you're teaching scripture or not, or whether or not you're like just talking about an encouraging word. Like, it's still a ministry, it's still messaging, it's still co-creating. But I almost want to argue that everything we do is ministry. Everything we do is co-creating with the Lord. And so I think that's why Jesus stresses so much about our heart posture and why
Yeah.
he stresses so much about, you know, how we're treating others is how we treat him, right? That whole idea of like what you did to the least of these, you did to me. I think he wants us to realize that every waking moment is an opportunity to do kingdom work. Now,
Mhm.
where I see it becoming an issue in our industry is, like, you're right. I think for some people, um, it is more ministry based, but then we say that as almost like not needing to be compensated for ministry work. Right. So you just use Paul and Peter as an example. They're both doing ministry work, but not both of them expect compensation for it, right? Because Paul is like, I have this tent making business over here. I'm cool. I'm good. I don't need you guys. Use that money for something else. Peter has left his business aside because he was a businessman, right? He has fishing. He was a tradesman. He left his business to fully 100% follow Jesus. So it it's a hard line, and I think where it becomes an issue is in terms of, like, getting book contracts that are actually decently paying the author for what they're doing, right? Getting speaking engagements that are actually compensating the author for what they're they're having to like give up in order to come speak, or teaching workshops and being able to charge a decent amount for your workshop. Like for some people, I actually had somebody say this to me the other day. She's like, I don't need to make money off of the sales of my book because I'm older, empty nester, single. Um, I I worked in a job that made me completely financially secure. I don't have to worry about the business side of it. I want to sell copies because I want to get in the hands of my reader, but I don't have a financial burden. I, on the other hand, feel like, no, I would like the money to like impact our family. Like I would like to make a lot of sales. And so it's really hard, I think, to find that defining line between what is striving, and I think it goes back to the heart posture.
Mhm.
What is striving to provide on your own and what is trusting the Lord to provide, but what is walking out the things that He's given you to do is, like you said, Peter and Paul are not, one is not being more faithful to the ministry that they've been given, but at the same time, like, and Peter, like Jesus said, leave your business behind and follow me. He didn't call Paul to do that. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
I think I posed the question to you, how are you deciding what to pick back up? And you were saying that you have to be really careful because you know your heart and you know the convictions that God has placed on you. And God is faithful and God is good. I think that heart posture is beautiful. I think we can sometimes lose sight of that personal conviction. I'm not saying you, I'm just saying us in the industry that we're in, this writing community. Sometimes we can spiritualize what we're doing so much that we diminish the need sometimes to have the business part there. And we can make those who are trying to make an income off of things feel bad that they even want the income,
Mm.
or feel like they're not trusting God as much or they're not being faithful to what He's called them to. And so I think we all have to be really careful about that in this industry of not making each other feel wrong for the way that we're approaching it. Like you are not wrong for wanting to be really careful about how you're approaching book sales, how you're approaching numbers, how you're going approaching platform. I think your posture is so beautiful and I have enjoyed it. Like even when you first started talking this morning or in our beginning of our conversation, you reminded me this morning I was questioning a lot of things. And you reminded me in that moment, just because of your heart posture, that God ultimately is the one in control. That I'm worrying about things like, how am I going to make this make sense? How am I going to make, like, of course, it's not all on us, right?
Right.
We are in a posture of partnership. We are in a place where we need to be relinquishing that control over to Lord and trusting Him to be a provider. I think where I struggle the most is trying to figure out how to walk that line between what is my responsibility, what has God asked me to do and what do I need to be obedient in doing and faithful in doing? And what needs to just be handed over and given over to Him to do? This is where I think I'm trying to get to. I don't feel like our industry is very helpful in that
Mm.
because they either over spiritualize it or overemphasize the striving side of it. And so there's like no middle ground. And it feels like I'm either really wrong for trying to figure out the details of like, how do I get this out there? Like I have a novel coming out next year and it's like, I was trying to figure out when do I release it and how much time do I put towards advertising it? Like there's best practices, but Lord, what do you want me to do? And when I'm not getting an answer directly from you, like how do I know what the right step is? And then if you, in some circles in our industry, it's like, well, you shouldn't care at all. You should just put it out there and God's going to do the rest. And I'm like, that's not true either because when your book doesn't sell because you just put it out there and God didn't do the rest, right?
Yeah.
You're kinda like, "Is that God saying that I shouldn't have done that book in the first place?" Right? And then
Right.
you start to question, did you even hear from him in the first place? And I find myself in that spot quite frequently.
Mm.
So, I'm gonna be quiet now and let you respond to that.
No, I completely agree. I think we need to find a middle ground, and it's gonna be a balance between stewardship of the
Mhm,
message that he's given us and that heart posture.
mm,
And I think those red flags are different for everyone. One of the things that I'm doing this year is I'm writing down phrases. Like when this phrase, when this thought, when this,
mm,
question comes up in my mind, that's a red flag that not that I'm doing the wrong thing, but I'm doing it in the wrong way. I'm not doing
mm,
it in a co-creating relationship with Christ. I have now
mm,
taken it over and I am putting the burden on myself. I am
right,
striving, I'm wanting the glory. Um so I think it's hard to say, here's the line of what I'm going to pick up and not pick up because it may be a little bit of hot potato, a little bit of like,
true.
let me try to pick this up. Oh, wait, I'm doing it wrong. Let me put it back
Mhm,
down. Let's try again. Maybe I'm not ready for this one. Maybe it's for another season. Um, and once again, not that any of those things are wrong,
yeah.
but it if I can't do them in the right way, then I'm not going to do them. I'm gonna wait until I've learned to do them in the right way, and I think
Does that make you wanna twitch, though? Like, it makes me wanna twitch. Like, the idea of, like, starting out something and then having to put it down,
Mhm. Oh, yeah, because 'cause
it,
I'm a
like, makes you
finisher. I
right.
want to
I'm
finish
like,
the project, yeah.
I do not wanna be seen as flaky, and I feel like,
Mhm,
to a
mhm,
degree, I'm like, "Oh my gosh," the amount of things I started and had to put back down
mm.
because the Lord was like, "You started that too soon."
Flaky
And
to
I
who,
ha
though?
oh
Who do
my
you
gosh,
wanna
to
not seem flaky to?
well, everybody else in the world, like, come on,
Because
like
if we pick
yeah.
something up and we run with it in our own power, we're being flaky to God, right? I'm realizing in this
Mm,
season that I am worried about not offending, but not living up to the expectations of the wrong side. And one of the things that I was
mm,
feeling was behind. I was feeling
yeah,
behind. Well, compared to who? Compared to what? Like, what is this standard that I've created in my mind that I need to compete with? Nobody, nobody out
yeah,
there is putting this on me other than myself against this invisible audience that I think is so important. Meanwhile, God has given me a task for this year. Now,
mhm,
it is a near impossible task because it's to do nothing, but that is the task, right? And if I am feeling like I'm behind on next year, so I need to get started now, what I've really told God is what I want to do is more important than what you've told me to do. And I am
mm,
stealing from something really precious right now. He knows,
mhm,
he knows that the best preparation that I could do for next year is not watching YouTube videos. It is not, setting up campaigns. He knows the best preparation that I can do this year for next year is to Sabbath. And so when I stop Sabbathing, I am being disobedient to that. I mean, I am literally saying my plan is better than your plan. And so I think we don't often think of it in those stark of terms because we don't want to. I mean, who wants to say like, "Yeah, I'm just absolutely disobeying God. I am throwing his plan out the window. I'm doing what I want to do instead." Nobody wants to be in that place.
mhm,
Um, but unless we really see it for what it is, then we're never going to be able to do it the right way. And um, so I feel like when we worry about what other people think of us, like they're going to think I'm flaky. Okay, but God knows that in putting it down, you're being faithful because you're being obedient. So, flaky to the world equals, or could, in a certain circumstance, equal faithfulness to God. And we have to decide which one do I want to be known for? Once again, not in the world's eyes, but in His eyes.
right.
On my walk with Him, which one do I want to be known for? And sometimes it means that we're going to look flaky in the eyes of the world, but we're being faithful to him. Cause I kind of feel like this year, I don't know if anyone is out there like paying attention or not that I'm Sabbathing. I don't know. I guess we'll
Yeah,
find out when I come back if people are like, where have you been?
mhm.
Um, but
But
in
you
my
didn't make any
mind,
kinda announcement, you just
not
stopped.
really. Yeah. But in my mind, I feel like somewhere out there, there's this judging audience that's like, either she gave up or she couldn't cut it or she's just, like eating
You
bonbons
know
on a
why?
sofa
Do
somewhere.
you think that about other people?
Okay, no, I don't. But there are other ways in which the way that I judge others directly comes back to me. Um,
Okay,
and
so
that,
expand on that, and then
yeah,
I'll ask why, or I'll tell you why I asked that. But go ahead.
yeah. So I'm an achiever.
Mhm,
I like to be on time. When people are
mhm,
not on time, then I am like, why can't they get it together? I mean,
mhm.
like, that is I'm not even masking the
Right.
not making it sound any better than what it is in my head. It's like, you're being disrespectful to everybody, like, just set your alarm earlier, like,
Mhm,
just get out the door. My brain really can't wrap itself around why people aren't just on time. But then when life happens, because life happens and none of us are perfect, even when we try really, really hard to be perfect,
yes.
um, and I show up late somewhere, I feel like the whole room is like, I mean, cannot believe Erin was late. This is just
Mhm,
unacceptable. She is not reliable. She is not responsible. We just can't trust her for anything now
right.
because I've brought that on myself.
Mhm,
The way we judge others in our minds, we are paving the path for it to come right back to us because it's going to happen.
mhm,
Another instance, I moved in with my parents after I graduated from college. There we go. There's a statement no achiever ever wants to say, right? And I had seen so many people move back in with their parents after college because they either didn't have a job or they didn't plan things out or whatever. In my mind, these are all, lack of responsibility. It was like the end of the world when I had to move back in with my parents after college. I did have a job. It was not what I had planned. I had gotten a degree in something and then God said shift after I graduated. It was like, really? Now? I'm so frustrating. Um, but I think he did that to show me like, look, you're not in control. This you don't get to create the plan and then everything just goes to plan. You need to rely on me. And sometimes that means eating a big old piece of humble pie and quit judging everybody else because you don't understand their circumstances and you don't understand why I have them there. And anyway, now I'm off on a tangent. But
that's okay.
yeah, that I could really go on about this because he has shown me over and over again that we're the ones, like, we think there's this outside audience that's judging us, but it is ourselves.
Yeah. I
It is
think
our
I would
own
agree
voice
with
that
you.
we've
Yeah,
used against others.
totally would agree with you because a lot of the things that I feel people might be judging me for are the things that I judge other people for. And
Yeah.
there's like, even right now, there is somebody that I follow on Instagram that has been absent from Instagram for a while now. And I'm like, now their business has continued to post. Their just personal
Mhm.
brand, they haven't continued to post.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what's the deal? Like, where are you? You seem to have it all together, and yet you're not showing up in the space anymore. And you didn't give any kind of reason why. You just disappeared. Like, if you can't hack it, then what hope do I have to hack it? Right. And so I have found myself like checking consistently,
Mhm.
being like, "Where is this person, and what has
Mhm.
happened to them?" And so I feel like there's probably somebody out there doing that to me too when I don't show up in the space. Like, it's just so asinine. Like judging them for not showing up on in a personal branding way, you know,
Yeah.
when they're continuing to do life and run their business and all the things that they're called to do. It's really silly that I have done that to other people, but there is a part of me that's like, people are seeing what I put out there and then they're like, "Oh, she said she was gonna do this and now she's not." Because I've done that to other. You know how many writer friends I have who say they're gonna write a book? "Oh, I'm writing my book. Oh, I'm working on
Yeah.
my novel. I'm revising my novel. Oh, I'm here, but I decided I need to go there." And have you submitted it? No, but or I went to this conference and I met with this. Like, I have so many friends who are always working on their novel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, just finish the dang novel already and like submit it. Like either publish it yourself or submit it somewhere. And like, so now, because I haven't gotten my dang novel written, I'm like, somebody's out there, like, totally like, she has been talking about the stupid novel for years and has not published it, right? Like, I start ascribing that to myself, like, that there's somebody
Mhm.
out there because I have done the same thing. And so then I'm like, I'm sure there is. Like, obviously, because I judge people, there's probably somebody judging me. I think it goes back to your point, though. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Does it matter at the end of the day? Who are you accountable to?
Yeah.
Your Heavenly Father, your family, your spouse, you know, the people you do life with, right? Those are the people who know inside and out. And I think somebody said to me the other day, they're like, Rachel, you just do not have grace for yourself for the season you're in.
Mm. Mhm.
And I was like, okay, that's probably true. But also, I'm like, I don't like that. I don't like the fact
Yeah.
that somebody is saying you have limitations and you won't acknowledge them.
Mm.
Because in my head, I shouldn't have limitations, right? But there's also like, do I do that to other people? No. I have grace for other people and their limitations, and I tell them this all the time. Why do I not do it for myself?
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's probably that achiever, perfectionist personality, um, that it's just hard to let it go, and it's hard to make it be about an audience of one when you have to keep other audiences in mind. I know that I don't wanna bash social media because where else do you get the free advertising that we get with something like social media? Like, we really do have online spaces, and online marketing have allowed independent publishing to
Yeah.
flourish.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest, like, we don't have to pay to play, and
Yeah.
that's huge. Whereas before, you would have had to pay vanity publishers, or you would have to just wait for some publisher to give you a contract, and you may never get it. And so it has opened up, and it allows for independent artists to do what they feel called to do and not be stuck in these cycles. However, it has added this whole other layer of what story am I telling the world? And now it's my story that I'm telling. And I don't know, like, it's different than being just like a novelist telling somebody else's story, or
Mhm.
a writer, just writing some observations or connecting the dots for people. Like, now I have to like tell my story over and over and over again. And we're not made to do that. But then maybe again, maybe we are. We are meant to share our testimony. But I think social media, we think we have to present a certain image, but that's not what testimony is about, right?
Yeah.
Like, witnessing God's redemptive, transformative power is not about presenting a perfect image. It's about saying, I'm just as messed up as you are. Lord have mercy on us all, right?
Well, and I think too that verse about, if we aren't willing to forgive, we are not going to be able to receive forgiveness.
Hmm.
And I think the same goes with grace. When we don't extend grace to others, we have no capacity to be able to receive God's grace. And grace has been such a big, huge gift this year.
Mm,
Just understanding what that is and just being washed in it. I mean,
yeah.
it's just been a really big gift. You had mentioned saying our story over and over again, and I'm thinking about this over the month because I'm thinking about social media. That's one of the things I have not missed at all. Haven't missed it. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go back. We'll see what that looks like. Um, Still not sure what that's going to look like. But there are a lot of things that have happened this year that I should be sharing or would have shared if it were another year, like the book
Hmm.
award and the publishing deal. I mean, like, none of
Yeah.
that has gone out, I didn't
Hmm.
even take the picture of me, like, signing the contract with the pen because, I just my desk
Right.
wasn't nice and it didn't happen. I just didn't take the
Hmm.
picture, because there was nowhere to share it. Well, the things still happened, and, um I will tell you, in the past, I've posted about book awards that I have won. And there is a certain person who's very close to me and I care for and love a lot. And I've won several awards and have posted about all of them. And this person in the, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of comments of people saying congratulations has never commented.
Mm.
Now, how, Erin, did you notice that in 300 comments? You weren't looking for this one person's words of affirmation where you,
Right.
yeah, I was. Because that's, what achievers
Mhm.
do. 300 is not enough if this one person didn't notice and
Mm.
validate. Um,
Mhm.
and can I just say it was really nice to not share about my book award this year? Like, there were no comments and no lack of comments, none there, none
Mm.
missing. It was just good. It was just a sweet gift from the Lord, and that was all it was. And it was enough.
Mhm.
And so I wonder what the next year is going to look like. I just wonder what social media is going to look like because I feel like we go to it looking for something in my lack of sharing things on social media. In person, pretty much anyone who will stand still for 10 seconds has heard about my Sabbath year. Like, everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
like, literally, if you've had a 5-minute conversation with me in the last 8 months, 9 months, you know I'm on a Sabbath year, and I've told you whatever lesson I'm learning at the time. I have not been able to stop talking about it. And it's not from this, like, I'm not trying to drum up an audience.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to get any kind of feedback or like build a, like you were telling your story over and over again. It isn't that at all. It's that I'm just so amazed at what God has done.
Mhm.
And I just can't stop telling people about it because I want them to experience a piece of it. Um,
Mm.
it's like so many verses that I have read my entire life. Now it's like I see them in a whole new way, like, "Oh, that's what you meant by my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That never made sense before. Or
Mm.
that's what it means when you say my grace is sufficient for you. I never knew what that meant before.
Mhm.
Not in a practical way where these words feel
Right.
like you've handed them to me as a present to be opened. And I want other people to experience that same thing. And so I
Mhm.
feel like when the heart posture is right, the sharing comes a lot more naturally. It doesn't feel weird. It doesn't feel exhausting. Now I haven't put it on social media, but the in-person sharing, it's just it's it's been so nice. It's been
I would
really
probably venture to say it's probably because you don't feel like you're just talking into a vacuum,
true. Yeah, there's
right?
a person standing
Because
right
there's a
there.
person there and there's
Yeah.
a recognition.
Mm,
And it's like even us talking,
yeah.
right, feels so much more impactful than if we were just sharing it on social.
And we're
There's
able
a
to be a lot more real here too.
yeah.
Um, I just have to say this hour that we spent or
Mhm.
more, when you count the before and the after, once a month has been, I think, pivotal for this Sabbath year. I don't think this year would have been the same without it.
Mhm.
Mainly for the encouragement, but for the confession. To be
Mhm.
able to say things out loud.
Yeah.
This is what I'm struggling with. This is where I went wrong. This is the really ugly piece I'm working through right now. That is stuff we don't talk about on social media because
Yep.
there's too many ears and too many
Mhm.
mouths coming back at you. But I think it is incredibly necessary in our Christian walk. And in order to be authentic in these changes that's happening, we need to be able to say those things out loud to another person, not necessarily in a public space, but we need a person that we can say them
Mm.
out loud to. And I'm just really grateful for this space to be able to do that because when we say out loud the lies,
Mm.
they lose their power. Um,
Agreed.
I sent a weird text. This these are the things that happen in a Sabbath year. Someone had texted me and said, "Hey, there's this like group of people. We're going to be getting
Mhm.
together once a month or whatever. Would you like to join this group?" This is common in writing communities,
Yeah.
right? You get these
Mhm.
little circles and pockets and things.
Mhm.
And my very first reaction, would be super honest, was there's a person in this group that I would love to work on a project with one day. I would love
Mhm.
to, I don't want to say it this way, but catch her eye.
Yeah.
And it was immediately a no. Once again, that why, not should I do this group, but why do I want to be in this group? And God
Mhm.
was like, nope, that's a big no. You have to say no. So I texted back and it was like, I am so honored. I would love to be in this group more than anything. But I have to be honest, my reasons for wanting to be in the group are really self-serving. So I'm gonna have to say no at this time. That was the text. But you know what? I am not looking back on that with any kind of, once again, that word condemnation anymore. There's no shame, there's no guilt. Yes, I had that thought, but I took it captive, right? I
Mhm.
took it captive. I changed it. I made a decision and I walked forward in freedom. And there are
Mhm.
so many places in my life where tiny little instances. I mean, if I told you the story, you'd be like, that's nothing. But it's not nothing because it's still replaying in my mind 10 years later. I'm still
Mhm.
experiencing shame over these instances where I acted in self-interest. I acted in ways that were not completely honest
Mhm.
to get what I wanted. And um, I wish I could just sit down with someone and tell them all the little stories and all the things. Thankfully, we have the Holy Spirit that we can do that too.
Yeah.
But we need that in our lives because once we say it out loud, it changes the narrative, it
Mhm.
changes the story, and we can walk forward in freedom. And I think we don't practice that enough because everything is so public. We
Mhm.
can't put it out there.
Oh, that's so true. But it's so important that we're in community with one another.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's vitally important, and I think that that is one thing with online, um, we have lost how essential being in community is with one another because we can read somebody's life happenings on their update post, and you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh," like a friend of mine, her son went into the hospital, and so she was asking
Mhm.
for prayer, and I'm like, "That's fine." Like, I'm glad she posted about it because then I could be praying for him. But, like, I don't know anything else that's going on in her life,
Yeah.
right? And that's okay. Like, we're not necessarily needing to be in community with one another, but I'm saying, like, it's really easy to feel like you're involved in somebody's life
Mhm.
because you get the little updates every so often. Um, there's even a term for it now, and I've forgotten what it is, where you feel like you're doing life beside somebody because you see their socials, but you're really not doing life with them. You're just getting updates from them, and they might not even know you. Like, it's that whole
Right.
idea of like, you're following somebody, like, I know so much about this person's life, but they don't actually know me. So, well, as we begin to wrap up, because we have gotten to the hour mark, um, so I know for me, I think where I'm at personally right now is just more of a struggling of like, oh my gosh, we are 9 months into the year. I feel like I have accomplished nothing. I feel more confused than ever, but yet the Lord has been stressing to me the idea of like planting the roots, putting the roots down. And so I'm in a season of like, or not a season, but just like a moment in this year of praying through what does that mean?
Mm.
Praying through what does that look like? And it's really easy for me to think I have something figured out and then get really confused about it and like start to second guess myself. And so that's where I'm at. And I'm hoping that when we come back together in a month, I'll have a little bit more clarity and I'll be a little bit more not feeling so kind of wishy washy or flaky. And I appreciate what you said earlier about that because that is a good reminder. Like, in whose eyes are you? And I do think there's a level of my perfectionism that's like, I just don't want to get it wrong. Like, I feel like I start going down one path and there's like, ah, that's not quite right. And I'm like, how many more times am I going to have to ask you what am I supposed to do? And I feel like I have heard from you, but then it's like, nope, not yet. Nope, not that. But then I also have to ask myself pretty honestly and ask, what are the things you knew you were supposed to do and you just didn't do them because you're afraid? What are the things that you were supposed to do and you didn't do because it wasn't glamorous? You know, what are the things that you're supposed to do that you didn't do because you were worried more about other people's opinions than his? And so that's where I'm at right now.
I think that if you just keep following what he has placed before you for this season, right?
Hmm.
And listening to his voice he's gonna part the waters when it's time for the waters to part. And sometimes it's before we step in the water, sometimes we're halfway knee deep in the water,
Yeah.
and I think you're following him and you're doing the right thing, and it's just a matter of continuing to be faithful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. True. So for this month, do you have anything in particular that you are like focused on? Or
Well,
no?
we've got the actual registrations opening up for the retreat, so kind of working on that, answering emails and questions about that. Other than that, my youngest will go back to school 3 days a week. She'll start next week. And so then there will be really like lots of time. And so I'm kind of like, okay, God, what does
What am
this
I
look like?
doing? Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? But he has filled all the months up until now, so I have no doubt he'll fill those as well. But I want to finish faithfully. I want to finish
Mm,
strong. Because I know that there's still 3 more months, 4 more months, and
yeah.
he has a lot to teach me in those months,
Mhm.
and I don't wanna miss one moment. So,
Mm.
being faithful. How about you? Coming month, what do you have coming up?
Um, I think trying to we're gonna be I don't even know. I feel like that's where my year has been, honestly, Erin. I'm like, I thought I knew. Apparently, I didn't know, and I'm almost nervous to make any kind of definitive like plans because I feel like the moment I make them, I'm in a very pessimistic mood today. You caught me on a day where my normal optimism is like lacking severely. And so there is a side of me that's like, why do I even bother making plans, Lord? Like you just keep interrupting them and which obviously there's something there that I need to dig into and pray with him about. But um I think trying to navigate um our new schedules, it's been a little rough doing it with school going back and everything. Um, but trying to navigate like this new school year, what does it look like? And being faithful to actually writing my novel. I was sharing with my husband a little bit about it and just how nervous I am with this particular novel. And I think a lot of it comes from just I'm touching on some really touchy topics, touching on some really touchy topics. And I'm nervous about what kind of response there will be to it. And so obviously, there's a lot of people pleasing things that are coming up in this conversation right now. And I'm sure anybody listening to it is like, Rachel, oh my goodness, like all you ever talk about is what people think of you. And I will say this is something that I have struggled with my whole life. So it's not surprising to me. Um, so working on that novel, continuing to write it, I think the one thing that did come up as I was talking to my husband about my novel is like I genuinely care about the characters, which is it's funny. Like when you start to like really care about your characters. And I said to him, I'm like, I just want to be really honest with the way that I portray them and their stories. And I don't want to get cliche. And I want to follow their stories wherever God has them, you know, be and go to. And so I'm kind of still discovering, like, I know what's going to happen, but I'm still discovering how it's going to unfold. And so that's exciting to me, but it's also really nerve wracking. But I also have been realizing just how much money has been going out the door for this very expensive habit of mine of writing. Um, and for our family, we do want it to become a business for our family. And so, what can I do to be more faithful with the stewardship of things that we have? So, wrestling with all that is kind of what's going on this next month for me. So, yeah,
Well, I'll be praying for that.
thanks. I hope when we come back together next month, I'll be like, and God was awesome. He did this, this, and this. Um,
Yeah.
because, like I said, I'm a little pessimistic this morning, but I'm praying through it, and I know He's good and He's faithful and He will answer prayers. It's been a really hard year, and I think it's been a hard year of remembering to trust Him, even when all of my plans and my hopes and dreams like just kind of slipped through my fingers. And um I think it's probably sorry, I'm just making the connection now. I would be entering my last trimester right now, and
Yeah.
so there's probably something there too that just as we're headed into September, I was supposed to be releasing my novel. I was gonna
Yeah.
be heading into my last trimester of, my pregnancy. So there's a lot of, like, things that just feel like they just got ripped from me, and I know that
Yeah.
that's not true, that that's just the feeling, but trying to actively submit those to the Lord and say, like, "These were my plans or my hopes or my dreams, and those all were interrupted, and I need to trust you even in the hard, even in
Yeah.
the times where it just feels like I don't understand. I don't know why." And I think that's why I'm a little hesitant in making plans for next year, making plans even for the next few months, because it's like, will it just be interrupted? Like, what's the point? And so needing to trust the Lord, even when it feels like, making plans just seem kind of useless, a waste of time. Um,
Mm.
Actively trusting Him. I think that's what Sabbath is all about. Like trusting Him to be provider and to be faithful, even when you don't know if the manna is going to show up the next day. So
I
that's,
think it's amazing when we have seasons where we don't make plans and then he shows up and does incredible things. And I think we have those seasons so that we can remember his faithfulness in these
yeah.
other seasons when we know he's capable
Mm-hmm.
of fixing the thing, of doing whatever it is, and he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know why.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's the same
Mm-hmm.
God in both.
Yep.
And we need the one to remember him in the other.
So true. So true. Well, on that beautiful note, we will wrap up our conversation and we will touch base next month. And in the meantime, God will continue to be the faithful God that He is. We'll talk to you guys next month. Okay, bye.